Hello. Oh, my father. There he is, waiting. Hi, Dad. You're waiting for me? Where you been all week waiting for me? You been listening? I haven't seen you out there. Welcome to everyone else as well. This is Frankenstein Tea, a daily short story program for adult listeners. I'm having a one-sided conversation with my father. I'm sure he's typing replies. Welcome to Friday. I think we made it to Friday afternoon, April 23rd, 2021. Sun is shining on Block Island and wind is howling. But the boat is running. The boat didn't run yesterday, but it's running today. And, there's action. People are moving about on the island. There's early spring action out there. And Rhode Island just posted some news about updates about the restrictions will be lessening. I don't know if anybody out there caught the Rhode Island news from the governor's report yesterday, but mask wearing will be phased out and social distancing is going to be dropped to 3 feet of space. Mask wearing will be phased out outside mask wearing. Inside, there have been no changes initiated or discussed. But outside will be phased out during the month of May. All new news to us here at the library. It just came out yesterday and was recirculated again today to libraries, specifically about mask wearing. And also, the other one is inside occupation. What's that called? So like how many people you can put in your building. They're going back to pre-COVID regulations by Memorial Day, May 29th, I think. So changes are happening. Things are happening. That's a mixed bag of emotions. So everybody just sit with that. I know that can be some people find that frightening. Some people are excited. Some people are confused. The information seems to be at odds with each other, right? Hospitalizations go up, restrictions lessen. Like, how could that be possible? Just stay informed, stay calm, take a time out with me every day at 3:00, step away from that. Listen to some stories. I guess I can't say that, right? I guess I can't give that update and then say, listen to me and step away from that information. Oh, it's also confusing. So today, in the confusion, I went for a classic, F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm not sure I've read any F. Scott Fitzgerald on this program. I probably have at this point. How could I have not have? And then the question becomes, is this the story I'm about to read to you, one that I've read to you before? Not only have I read him, but Kristen, this is the story you read to us. So I'm not sure on either of those accounts. And so I'm just going to go for it. I may have read this story to you before. I feel like I read part of this story before, to myself at least. Not really sure what's happening. But I'm going to read it for today, Friday afternoon. F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is I Die for You and Other Lost Stories. I Die for You and Other Lost Stories by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This book was published by Scribner in 2017. And, there's an introduction and there's an editorial note and then there's stories. And then I'm reading something to you that's an uncollected story, which I think might mean it's never been published with other stories before. I think it probably means it's been published, but not in a collection, uncollected stories. I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm reading. I'm reading an uncollected story of F. Scott Fitzgerald. Let me take a sip of my water. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Thank you for the light. Mrs. Hanson was a pretty, somewhat faded woman of 40 who sold corsets and girdles, traveling out of Chicago. For many years, her territory had swung around through Toledo, Lima, Springfield, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Fort Wayne. And her transfer to the Iowa, Kansas, Missouri district was a promotion, for her firm was more strongly entrenched west of the Ohio. Eastward, however, she had known her clientele chattily and was often offered a drink or a cigarette in the buyer's office after business was concluded. But she soon found that in her new district, things were different. Not only was she never asked if she could smoke, but several times her own inquiry as to whether anyone would mind was answered half apologetically with, "It's not that I mind, but it has a bad influence on the employees." "Oh, of course, I understand." Smoking meant a lot to her sometimes. She worked very hard, and it had some ability to rest and relax her psychologically. She was a widow, and she had no close relatives to write to in the evenings. While more than one moving picture a week hurt her eyes, so that smoking had come to be an important punctuation mark in the long sentence of a day on the road. The last week of her first trip on the new circuit found her in Kansas City. It was mid-August, and she felt somewhat lonely among all the new contacts of the past fortnight, and she was delighted to find at the outer desk of one firm a woman she had known in Chicago. She sat down before having herself announced, and in the course of the conversation found out a little about the man she was going to interview. "Will he mind if I smoke?" "What? My God, yes," said her friend. "He's given money to support the law against it." "Oh, well, I'm grateful for the advice, more than grateful." "You better watch it everywhere around here," her friend said, "especially with the men over 50, the ones that weren't in the war. A man once told me that nobody who was in the war would ever object to anyone smoking." But at her very next stop, Mrs. Hanson ran into the exception. He seemed such a pleasant young man, but his eyes fixed with so much fascination on the cigarette that she tapped on her thumbnail that she put it away. She was rewarded when he asked her to lunch, and during the hour, she obtained a considerable order. Afterwards, he insisted on driving her to her next appointment, though she had intended to spot a hotel in the vicinity and take a few puffs in the washroom. It was one of those days full of waiting. Everyone was busy, was late, and it seemed that when they did appear, they were the sort of hatchet-faced men who did not like other people's self-indulgence, or they were women willingly or unwillingly committed to the ideas of these men. She hadn't smoked since breakfast, and she suddenly realized that was why she felt a vague dissatisfaction at the end of each call, no matter how successful it had been in a business way. Aloud, she would say, "We think we cover a different field. It's all rubber and canvas, of course, but we do manage to put them together in a different way. A 30% increase in national advertising in 1 year tells its own story." And to herself, she was thinking, "If I could just get 3 puffs, I could sell old-fashioned whalebone." She had one more store to visit now, but her engagement was not for half an hour. That was just time to go to her hotel, but as there was no taxi in sight, she walked along the street thinking, "Perhaps I ought to give up cigarettes. I'm getting to be a drug fiend." Before her, she saw the Catholic cathedral. It seemed very tall. Suddenly, she had an inspiration. If so much incense had gone up in the spires to God, a little smoke in the vestibule would make little difference. How could the good Lord care if a tired woman took a few puffs in the vestibule? Nevertheless, though she was not a Catholic, the thought offended her, It didn't seem so important whether she had her cigarette because it might offend a lot of other people too. Still, he wouldn't mind, she thought persistently. In his days, they hadn't even discovered tobacco. She went into the church. The vestibule was dark, and she felt for a match in the bag she carried, but there wasn't any. I'll go and get a light from one of their candles, she thought. And the darkness of the nave, no, the darkness of the nave was broken only by a splash of light in a corner. She walked up the aisle toward the white blur and found that it was not made by candles, and in any case, it was going out soon. An old man was on the point of illuminating a last oil lamp. These are votive offerings, he said. We put them out at night. They float in the oil, and we think it means more to the people that give them to save them for next day than it would to keep them burning all night. I see. He struck out the last one. There was no light left in the cathedral now, save an electric chandelier high overhead and the ever-burning lamp in the front of the sacrament. Good night, the sexton said. Good night. I guess you came here to pray. Yes, I did. He went out into the sacristy. Mrs. Hanson knelt down and prayed. It had been a long time since she had prayed. She scarcely knew what to pray for, so she prayed for her employer and for the clients in Des Moines and Kansas City. When she had finished praying, she knelt up. She was not used to prayer. The image of the Madonna gazed down upon her from a niche 6 feet above her head. Vaguely, she regarded it. Then she got up from her knees and sank back wearily in the corner of the pew. In her imagination, the Virgin came down, like in the play The Miracle, and took her place and sold corsets and girdles for her, and was tired just as she was. Then, for a few minutes, Mrs. Hanson must have slept. She awoke at the realization that something had changed, and only gradually she perceived that there was a familiar scent that was not incense in the air, and that her fingers smarted. Then she realized that the cigarette she held in her hand was alight, was burning. Still too drowsy to think, she took a puff to keep the flame alive. Then she looked up again at the Madonna's vague niche in the half-darkness. Thank you for the light, she said. That didn't seem quite enough, so she got down on her knees, the smoke twisting up from the cigarette between her fingers. Thank you very much for the light, she said again. F. Scott Fitzgerald, thank you for the light. My father says I read it before. I don't think so, Dad. I think it was familiar in the beginning, but really through the end, you remember the ending? Maybe I read it before. I'm not sure. It would make sense that I read it. It's like the shortest story in this book, and often I scramble for something, just mostly because I like to pre-read it before I read aloud to you. And so sometimes a shorter one, something I can have time to pre-read. Anyway, if you haven't heard it before, I hope you enjoyed it. If you had heard it before, I hope you enjoyed it a second time, or a third time, or a fourth time. I hope you have a great afternoon. Mask up, wash your hands, keep your distance, get your shots, eat your vegetables, sleep well, get outside, call a loved one, take a shower. Keep on trucking. We're getting through this. We're almost through it. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. Bye, Dad.